Halo is no stranger to making mistakes. Even as far back as Halo 2, things were changed that made the community riot. I'm looking at you, Halo2sucks.com. We could all sit here and list the missteps that this franchise has taken over the years, but if you ask me, there's one misstep that stands above all the rest. The removal of a certain element of Halo that seems to have almost permanently damaged its tone.
Me!
That's right, I genuinely think that Halo 3's decision to kill Johnson was one of the biggest mistakes this franchise has ever made. One that had an adverse effect on almost every story that followed. But is there a way that we could potentially fix this problem? Well, according to Marty O'Donnell, there may be.
This is it, baby. Hold me.
So before we go further, you need to know the backstory of Johnson's death because it's actually quite a lot deeper than most would realise. The short is that it was all Marty's idea, so you know who to blame. The long is that Halo 3's story wasn't written like Halo 2's or even Combat Evolved's. Jason Jones basically just went AWOL after the stresses of Halo 2's development. I think Marty said that he went to Thailand or something, and so wasn't present during Halo 3's development to guide the story like in the previous games. In fact, there are even 2 separate Easter eggs in Halo 3 that jokingly reference his absence. And Joe Staten wasn't present for most of Halo 3's story development either. He was off busy writing Contact Harvest, and so Marty and a few others were left with a very prototype story and pretty much had to finish it all up themselves. One of Marty's main goals with Halo 3's ending was to really make the player believe that Master Chief was in fact dead, or I guess in the case of the Spartans, MIA, floating in space forevermore, never to be found. But because that early version of Halo 3's script had literally no character deaths, they knew that players just wouldn't believe that. They had to make people realise that no matter who a character was or how important they were, they could still die. Nobody was allowed to be safe. That's why Miranda was killed off, and that's also why Truth was killed off as well. Fun fact, originally Truth was meant to survive Halo 3, which I don't really know how that would have worked out, but he was meant to, and ultimately that's also why Sergeant Johnson was killed off. That, and to also make you really want to kill Spark. However, as we now know, Guilty Spark actually survived Halo 3 to a degree. A decision which, by the way, I still strongly dislike, regardless of how well he's been handled post-Halo 3, or I guess Jackass. The thought of any element of Spark surviving Halo 3, I strongly dislike. It was very, very clear at the end of that game that we were meant to have permanently killed him. But having a death like one that was as clear-cut as Guilty Spark's overturned opens the floodgates for other deaths in the game to not exactly be as final as they looked. And of course, I'm referring to Johnson. Right, okay, before you leave a dislike and an angry comment, I'm not the one saying that Johnson could have survived. Actually, believe it or not, it's the Grim Reaper himself saying that, Marty O'Donnell. A few months ago, he said on Twitter, so he made it off the first Halo, why couldn't he have done it again? I didn't kill him, 343 Guilty Spark killed him. So, there you go. Right from a horse's mouth, the man who ordered the execution of Sergeant Johnson says that it's within the realms of possibility that he could have survived. Now, that's all well and good, but the real question here is, should Johnson come back? Well, to be honest, I am so torn on this, because on the one hand, I really don't like retcons of any kind, and I especially don't like it when things are changed that retroactively nullify the original trilogy. That story was so perfectly told from beginning to end, and I don't want any of its elements to be retroactively made less impactful by something that the original writers and developers never intended nor had any say in. That said, it's already happened for Guilty Spark, and also the Flood as well. Awaken the Nightmare made it canon that the Installation 04B firing actually didn't eradicate all of the Flood on the Ark, which required its defences to then quarantine the High Charity crash site in response. Oh, and also, the Covenant technically weren't defeated at the end of Halo 3 either. I mean, the main Covenant were, but the Covenant as like an ideology prevailed, which is the most realistic of all of them, but at the same time, it still doesn't change the fact that at this point, 3/4 of the major plot points that are tied up in Halo 3 have been resurrected in some form after the fact. So, even though I am by no means a huge fan of the idea, at this point, I'm kinda just leaning towards saying screw it, bring back Johnson.
Now that we're waging an epic guerrilla war against the Covenant Horde, I'm sure glad I'm packing an
epic HiddenXperia flood-themed PC made in partnership with Apex Gaming PCs. Hit the link in the description to check out the Pureform PC, the Gravemind PC, or if you're feeling extra spicy, the Primordial PC, if you want to run all the latest and greatest games, not just at jaw-dropping resolutions, but at blistering frame rates as well. And don't forget to use code HIDDEN at checkout for up to $250 off your order.
Buy one! Heck, buy two! That's an order, soldier! Please, don't shake the light bulb.
So much of the original trilogy's charm came from Johnson and his interactions with various characters. He was the comedic yet badass backbone of Halo 2 and Halo 3, and was a core part of the kind of strange but unique tones those campaigns had. Badass, dramatic, serious, comedic, and tense. Johnson played a part in every one of those emotions, and every campaign since his death has been missing something thanks to his absence.
How you doing?
Halo needs that badass third character back to play off the seriousness of the Chief and the intelligent yet light-hearted character of Cortana, or I guess the weapon now. The original trilogy had that almost trifecta of character archetypes nailed down to a point of perfection. Master Chief was the physical strength, Cortana was the intelligent strength, and Johnson was the personality strength. Because Chief was always a silent protagonist, it felt like Johnson almost kind of filled in for Chief's lack of character by being the badass 80s action movie protagonist that Chief acted like. But even though 343 have made Chief a lot more expressive and talkative now, it still doesn't feel right because his persona is radically different to Johnson's. Besides the very occasional one-liner, Chief in 343's games isn't like an 80s action protagonist like Johnson was. Just like Bungie's trademark combat triangle of guns, melee, and grenades, this character triangle almost formed so much of the bulk of Halo's charm. It wasn't quite as rigid and cemented as the combat triangle, there were tons of other characters and elements that played into it, but I always felt like it was the core, and when one of the 3 pillars of that triangle are removed, you lose the charm that it created. Halo 4 tried to replace Johnson with Palmer, at least I think it did, it seemed like they tried that, and then Halo 5 tried it with its absurdly large cast of main characters, and of course Infinite tried it with the pilot, but I think it's safe to say that none of these attempted replacements really sufficed. I didn't hate Palmer like some seem to, but she just came off as a bit brash and arrogant without ever really earning the right to be that like Johnson did. And as much as I did like the pilot in Infinite, and also, of course, the welcome comedic relief that he provided to the game, his entire story arc was basically just him going from being a massive pussy to finding his courage and regaining his hope, shaking off the nihilism. Even though he acted as a third pillar in that character triangle, his character was radically different to Johnson's in almost every way. I think even if you're someone who loves both Palmer and the pilot, you can't argue that they didn't fill the void left by Johnson. So then, what happens to Johnson from here? Well, I think there are 2 options. The first will be pretty familiar if you watch my video about the wasted potential of Halo, but I think there are definitely ways to bring Johnson back without retconning his death in any way. Spin-off games. Johnson's main story outside of the games was Contact Harvest. It was something of like an origin prequel story for him. And just like the Fall of Reach, I think Contact Harvest would make for a fantastic, faithful gamification. Seriously, I seem to say it all the time now, but the fact that Contact Harvest hasn't been turned into a game yet is honestly baffling. It deserves it as much as Reach did. And the second option is they pull a Palpatine and have Johnson just miraculously survive Halo 3, just like Spark did, just like the High Charity Flood did, and kind of like how the Covenant did. Okay, somehow Palpatine has returned is like the worst example I could have given for this. There are definitely better ways that they could bring Johnson back. Far better ways than that. To be honest, I kind of always liked the idea of Johnson just like emerging from smoke with 2 sticks and a rock as if nothing ever happened, armed with a Halo 2 style quip.
So, Johnson, when you gonna tell me how you made it back home in one piece?
Sorry, Guns. It's classified.
My ass!
Or, you know, something equally as ridiculous and nonsensical. I think something like that would actually be quite in tune with Johnson's character, and also the 80s action movie unrealistic rule of cool foundations of his character. Truth be told though, I honestly I love and I hate the idea of Johnson coming back, at least with them retconning his death. I want Johnson and David Scully to come back so unbelievably bad, but at the same time, I also don't want any more of Halo 3's tied up plot points to be nullified. It's a real tough one. I think the way forward is spin-offs, but I'm not 100% against the idea of him just miraculously surviving, like I said. What do you think? Are you in the Marty O'Donnell camp of just saying screw it, bring the king back? Or, despite your uncontrollable love for Johnson, are you in the camp of wanting him to stay dead? Let me hear it in the comments. Make sure you check out my Resident Evil 4 videos, stranger. Thank you. Big thank you to all of my amazing patrons for the continued support over there. As per usual, thank you all so much, and thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.